Hi, you're on the Reddit Confessions channel, where truth burns louder than excuses. The moment I heard her laugh outside the door, I knew she'd forgotten me again. Not in a dramatic, tear-streaked way. No, in the casual, thoughtless way people forget umbrellas on sunny days. And I had been that umbrella for years. Dinner was still warm. I'd made her favorite. Penne with roasted red peppers and that ridiculous almond basil pesto she once said reminded her of our honeymoon. She probably forgot saying that too. At 6:03 p.m., she sent a voice note. Not a text, a voice note. Don't wait up, okay? The girls really needed tonight. Might get messy, There was music in the background. And a man's voice laughing. Definitely not a girl. I still set the table for two. Lit a candle. Even folded her napkin the way she liked it. Diagonally tucked under the fork. It's pathetic, I know. But there's something gut-wrenching about keeping up routines when the other person stopped months ago. By 9:40 p.m., the pasta had begun to crust over. By 10:15 p.m., I had cleaned everything up, except her plate. I left it out, stubbornly, like it would guilt her into remembering someone once cared if she was hungry. Then the clock struck 2:07 a.m. Laughter. Not just hers, his. Someone walked her up the steps. Her heels wobbled. She squealed, told him to age. Like we didn't live in a building with neighbors and history and people who had hearts. The door creaked open. She stumbled in, clutching her heels in one hand and her purse in the other like trophies from a night she'd never earned. "Oh, you're up?" She blinked, like I was the surprise here. I didn't answer. She dropped her shoes at the door, sauntered past the table, paused, and looked down at the cold plate I'd left for her. Then smirked. "Is that penne?" she asked, like it was an inside joke I'd missed. I stared at her, really looked this time. Noticed the way she carried the scent of someone else's cologne. How her lipstick had been reapplied too late in the night. How her eyes no longer flinched when they met mine. She used to flinch, back when she cared how I felt. I stood up, took the plate and scraped it into the trash. She didn't stop me. She just walked into the bathroom, still humming something off-key. And as the sink ran behind the door she closed without a word. I finally said it. Not out loud, but inside. "You laughed through my last night of waiting." The water ran for 22 minutes. I know because I counted. Not out of spite, but because I had nothing else to hold on to. Just the hum of the faucet behind the door and the weight of everything she didn't say when she walked in. That sound used to mean something simple. A shower after a long day. A sign she was home. Now it was just white noise drowning out the silence between us. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the edge of the couch, staring at the spot where she dropped her heels. One was tilted sideways like even her shoes were too tired to keep pretending. I kept thinking about how she didn't even ask why I left dinner out. Didn't flinch at the cold plate. Didn't say, "Sorry I'm late." Didn't offer even a fake excuse. Just walked in, half drunk, half laughing, all gone. I guess the worst part isn't being lied to. It's being forgotten. When morning came, I was still in the same spot. She emerged from the bathroom looking like someone who had no regrets. Hair damp, skin glowing from expensive products, wearing one of my old t-shirts like it gave her the right to act like nothing happened. She grabbed her phone from the table and scrolled casually, thumb flicking through her notifications like it was just another Saturday. "Hey," she said, voice raspy but cheerful. "Wanna get coffee later?" It hit me harder than if she'd thrown something. Coffee? After everything? Like we were still that couple who went to farmers markets and shared muffins and held hands over lattes. She thought I was still that man, the one who waited, forgave, kept quiet. I didn't answer. She finally looked at me. Really looked, and something flickered in her expression. Confusion. Annoyance? Regret? Hard to tell, it passed too quickly. She furrowed her brow and asked, "What's with the attitude?" I stood up slowly, not to intimidate, that was never my way, but because something inside me had shifted. Not in anger, not in desperation, just finality. "You didn't come home last night," I said, voice steady. She shrugged. "I told you I was out with the girls. Why are you acting like I cheated on you or something?" I stared at her, waiting for the part where she admitted she wasn't with the girls. The part where she owned the lie. But it never came. She just kept looking at me like I was the one ruining a perfectly good morning. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out the small white box I'd hidden behind the milk. Inside was a single key, hers. I placed it on the table. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. I didn't answer. For the first time in years, I watched her panic. Not loudly, but in the way her eyes darted, the way her fingers tightened around her phone, the way her smile collapsed without her even noticing. She sat down slowly, like her legs had just remembered what gravity was. "You're not serious." But I was. And for the first time, she knew it. She sat there in complete disbelief, as if I had just broken some invisible rule she assumed I'd always follow. The man who cooked, cleaned, forgave, waited, wasn't supposed to say no. I wasn't supposed to stand up for myself. I was her constant, her background, her guaranteed. And now I was the one slipping through her fingers. "You're seriously doing this over one night out?" she scoffed, like I just flipped a table because she forgot to do the dishes. But that's the problem with people like her. They never see the last straw. They only see the mess when it's already too late. She stood up sharply, pushing the chair back so hard it screeched. "Clay, come on. Don't be dramatic. Nothing happened. I had a few drinks." I laughed. "Big deal." I opened the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out a plain white envelope. No name on the front. No fancy lettering. Just thick, slightly bent paper, sealed days ago when I was still hoping I wouldn't have to use it. I placed it gently on the counter, right where her morning coffee usually went. She eyed it like it was ticking. "What's that?" "Read it," I said. She didn't move at first, just stared at me, then at the envelope, then back at me. With a hesitant hand, she peeled it open. Inside was a printout of her credit card transactions from the last month. The ones I found after logging into the joint account she probably forgot I still had access to. A downtown hotel. Not once, not twice, for separate charges. 2 in her name, 2 in someone else's. And attached to the bottom was a photo. Not from me. From a friend who happened to see her outside the bar last Thursday night. She wasn't with Sierra. She wasn't even with anyone I recognized. Just some guy in a dark shirt with his hand way too familiar with her lower back. She didn't say a word. Her mouth hung open like she wanted to speak but didn't know which lie to start with. I watched her shoulders drop like the weight of her own fiction had finally started to press down. "You were never just laughing," I said quietly. "You were disappearing. Slowly. I just didn't want to believe it." She placed the papers back on the counter, but her hands were trembling. "This doesn't mean anything," she muttered. "You're making it bigger than it is." "No," I said. "You just made it smaller than it ever should have been." And then I walked past her toward the bedroom. She followed. "Wait, Clay, come on, wait, please. Let's talk about this." I opened the closet, pulled out the small overnight bag I'd packed 2 days earlier. Not because I knew exactly what I was going to do, but because something in me had already let go. Her voice cracked behind me. "You're actually leaving?" I zipped the bag, turned to her, and nodded once. "You laughed through the night like I was a joke. I'm just giving you the punchline." The thing about someone who's used to getting away with everything is that they don't know what to do when they're finally caught. She stood there in our hallway, blinking like someone just pulled the floor out from under her. I'd seen her cry before, when her favorite show ended, when her dress didn't fit, even when we ran out of oat milk once. But this was different. This was panic. Real, raw, unscripted panic. And it wasn't because she hurt me. It was because I finally stopped letting her. "Clay, please," she whispered, stepping closer, her voice suddenly gentle. "We've had worse fights, haven't we? You're not just going to walk out over some receipts. This is our life." That word, our, felt like an insult now, because I had been the only one living in this marriage for the past year. I had been the one trying to breathe life into a dying routine, keeping it warm with dinners and notes and quiet forgiveness. She'd been somewhere else the whole time. Maybe in that hotel room, maybe in that bar, or maybe just behind a screen laughing at texts I never saw. I kept moving. The bag was heavier than I remembered. I think it was the weight of everything I didn't pack. The photographs, the anniversary cards, the broken promises. She grabbed my arm. "We can fix this. Okay? I'll delete his number. I'll block him. It didn't mean anything. I swear." Her eyes darted, searching my face like it still held a trace of that forgiving man she once knew. But I wasn't there anymore. Just the shell of someone who used to believe her. "It's not about him," I said. "It's about you." She paused, confused. "What do you mean? You didn't cheat because of him. You cheated because I became invisible. And you liked it that way." She stepped back like I'd hit her. And for a second, I thought she might scream. But she didn't. Instead, she did something worse. She started crying. Not the ugly, honest kind. No, this was a controlled, quiet sob, engineered perfectly between guilt and manipulation. I'd seen it once before when she wanted out of a speeding ticket. She was performing now, and I knew it. "Don't do this, Clay," she sniffled. "I made a mistake. I messed up. But you leaving won't fix anything. We've got history, memories, don't throw that away." I stared at her, feeling nothing. Not hate, not anger, just exhaustion. "You threw it away first," I replied. "I'm just cleaning up after you." She stood there as I moved past her, still holding on to that last thread of control. Still believing that if she cried long enough, I'd come back, that I'd stop at the door and crumble like I always had before. But I didn't. As I reached the doorknob, she asked quietly, "Where are you going?" I turned to her one last time. "To somewhere I don't feel like an afterthought." Then I walked out, and for the first time in years I didn't look back. I didn't expect her to follow me, and she didn't. No rushed footsteps down the hallway, no dramatic shouting behind the door. Just silence. A silence that used to terrify me because I mistook it for loneliness. But now it felt different, felt earned. Like I had finally stepped out of the fog she kept me in. I stayed at a cheap extended stay place across town. The kind of place that smelled like leftover takeout and dust from other people's regrets. The carpet was sticky. The bed sagged. But I slept for 8 uninterrupted hours for the first time in months. No late-night doors opening, no muffled giggles from the hallway, no wondering who she was texting while facing away from me in bed. Just the hum of the air conditioner and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd finally left. She didn't call that morning. No missed calls. No texts. Not even a fake apology laced with just enough guilt to draw me back in. And for someone who always needed to control the narrative, her silence spoke volumes. I guess she expected me to come crawling back like always. Tail between my legs, desperate to salvage whatever crumbs she decided to throw my way. But I didn't. I went to work. I bought my own toothpaste. I cooked for one, and it tasted better than anything I'd had in our apartment for the past year. That night, I opened my laptop and clicked through an old photo album. Our early days, vacations, birthdays, a dozen blurry selfies in bed with sunlight hitting our faces. Back when she looked at me like I mattered. Back when I didn't flinch every time her phone lit up after midnight. And suddenly I didn't feel sad. I felt angry. Not the loud kind of anger. Not the plate-smashing, fist-clenching kind. The quiet kind. The kind that creeps up after you realize you spent years shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's life. The kind that burns slow when you remember how many times you said, "It's fine," when it absolutely wasn't. The kind of anger that doesn't scream, it just walks away and never returns. Around 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Lacey, I left your charger on the table. I'll be out tomorrow morning if you want to pick it up." That was it. No emotion. No accountability. Just logistics. I didn't respond. I knew what she was doing. Pretending to be civil, acting like this was some casual break we'd both laugh about later. Like we were just two mature adults parting ways after a small misunderstanding. But what she failed to understand was this wasn't about the charger, or the hotel receipts, or even the laughter at 2 a.m. This was about the years I wasted apologizing for needing love, for asking her to come home, for making her dinner when she never asked, and staying quiet when I should have screamed. So I left her on read. The next morning, I didn't go back. I didn't want the charger. I didn't want any of it. I had nothing left to retrieve, because the only thing I ever wanted from her was the one thing she never gave: consistency. I went for a walk instead, somewhere unfamiliar, somewhere quiet, and I realized that even though I had no plan, no new home, and no idea what came next, I finally had something better than all of that. I had peace. Took her 3 days to call me. 3 full days of radio silence. No frantic texts. No please come back. No apologies that started with I was drunk and ended with you misunderstood. And honestly, part of me was prepared for that. I had finally accepted that I was never her priority. Just a placeholder until something better or more exciting came along. So when her name flashed on my screen, I didn't answer immediately. I let it ring out, watched it fade like she used to fade from our home night after night. She called again 5 minutes later, then once more an hour after that. The 4th time I picked up, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear what version of herself she'd choose to be this time. Clay, she breathed, like saying my name was supposed to melt all the damage away. You've made your point. Can we just talk? Face to face? That was her trick. Packaging manipulation in a tone soft enough to pass for sincerity. And the worst part? I used to fall for it. I'd hear her voice and immediately start rewriting the story in my head, just to give her another chance. But not this time. There's nothing left to talk about, I said, keeping my voice calm. You already said everything that mattered. You just didn't say it to me. She went quiet, then tried to pivot. Look, I know things haven't been perfect, and I know I've been distant, but leaving? That's extreme. We're married, Clay. That means something. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she finally said it, we're married. That was supposed to be her trump card. The reason I'd come crawling back. Like vows were enough to erase what she'd done when she thought I wasn't watching. You didn't act married, I said. You acted available. There's a difference. That hit her. I could feel it through the phone. She stammered, started to say something, then stopped. She probably thought about lying or softening the truth or pivoting again. But I didn't give her the chance. You don't miss me, I continued. You miss control. You miss knowing I'll be there no matter how far you wander. But I'm done being the backup plan to your chaos. You think I don't care? She snapped suddenly. You think this has been easy for me? You just left. I left, I said, because I finally realized I wasn't coming home anymore. I was returning to a version of myself I hated. The one who waited, who begged, who apologized for feeling neglected. I expected her to hang up, to curse, to throw one last dig before slamming the door shut. But instead, she whispered something that genuinely surprised me. Not because it was emotional, but because it was so painfully revealing. I didn't think you'd actually do it. That's when I knew. She never thought I'd walk. She thought I was too soft, too scared, too dependent on the version of love she sold me. She thought the waiting, the forgiving, the endless nights of pretending I was okay would never end. But they had. I had. And now all she had left was the echo of a man who used to wait by the door, staring at a plate of cold pasta, hoping she'd come home with the version of herself she'd promised me years ago. That version never came back. And now neither would I. She showed up at my job 2 days later. I was on my lunch break, sitting in the alley behind the store with a plastic container of leftovers and a lukewarm bottle of water. I remember the sun glaring off the concrete, the sound of delivery trucks echoing down the street, and then suddenly, there she was, Lacey, dressed like nothing had happened, hair perfect, makeup soft, wearing that same denim jacket I once bought her for our 2nd anniversary. Hey, she said like it was casual, like this was a normal afternoon and not the aftermath of the biggest fracture our relationship had ever suffered. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her, waiting to see what angle she'd try now. She stepped closer, smiling gently. I thought, maybe we could talk. Not on the phone this time. I shook my head, pushing the food away. My appetite vanished the second she arrived. You don't just show up, I said. You lost that right when you turned our marriage into a side quest. She flinched at that, but recovered quickly. You're angry. I get that. But Clay, you're making this bigger than it is. There it was again, that dismissal. That subtle way she tried to frame everything as a misunderstanding, a miscommunication, instead of what it truly was, a pattern. A deliberate choice to prioritize excitement, attention, and someone else's hands over a man who would have moved mountains just to feel needed. You cheated, I said, keeping my voice low but firm. You lied. You laughed your way through nights while I stayed home wondering if I even mattered anymore. Her eyes dropped to the ground. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was, I challenged. She looked up, and for the first time in a while, I saw something resembling honesty. Not remorse, but maybe something close to discomfort. The kind people feel when they're finally out of excuses. I didn't feel seen, she said quietly. You were always working, always tired. I just needed to feel alive again. That hurt more than I expected, because she wasn't wrong. I was tired. I was stretched thin, trying to keep up with bills, her spontaneous purchases, her ever-changing moods. I was the steady one, the reliable one, and she resented me for it. So instead of telling me that, I replied, you let someone else see you. You laughed with him, touched him, slept next to him, while I was at home hoping you'd smile at me the way you used to. She stepped forward, her voice trembling now. I messed up, but I want to fix it. I stood, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. You want to fix the consequences, not the cause. You want to rewind time to the part where I still waited by the door like a fool. That's not fair, she started. No, I cut in. What's not fair is how long I made excuses for you. How many times I convinced myself that love meant staying quiet while you slowly erased me. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't soften. Couldn't, because this wasn't a moment for redemption. It was a moment of truth. A moment she finally had to sit in the reality she created. Goodbye, Lacey, I said, walking past her. She didn't follow. She just stood there, in the alley behind the place I worked, watching the man she thought would never leave finally disappear into the daylight. I didn't hear from her after that. No follow-up texts, no surprise visits, just silence. And for once, it didn't hurt. Felt clean. Felt like peace. I returned to that cheap motel room one last time, packed my things, and checked out with no real destination in mind. I didn't need one. For the first time in years, I wasn't circling around her moods, her nights out, her silence. I was moving forward, even if I didn't know exactly where forward led. Weeks passed. I rented a small studio apartment across town. Nothing fancy. A creaky floor, mismatched cabinets, and a view of the alley where raccoons held nightly conferences. But it was mine. Every part of it. I picked the couch. I stocked the fridge. I decided when to turn on the music and, more importantly, when to turn it off. No second-guessing. No late-night fights. No pretending I was fine. The first Saturday alone, I made that same pasta she used to love. Roasted red pepper penne with that ridiculous almond basil pesto. Except this time, I made it for me. I sat on the floor, still didn't have a dining table, and ate it while watching some old documentary about medieval architecture. And halfway through my meal, I laughed. Not because the show was funny, but because I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping she'd walk through the door. I wasn't clinging to some hollow version of what we used to be. I was free. Months later, I met someone. Her name was Daphne. Not a whirlwind romance. Not a rebound. Just real. She asked questions. She listened. She didn't interrupt or change the subject or reach for her phone mid-conversation. She liked thunderstorms and old movies and making lists for no reason. We weren't perfect, but we were present. And that was enough. One day, out of curiosity more than anything, I looked Lacey up. Her social media was still active. Same curated smile. Same captions about living her truth and growing through what she goes through. I didn't feel bitter. I didn't miss her. If anything, I felt sorry. Not for her, but for the version of me that kept hoping she'd change. that kept setting a place at the table for someone who had already left the room. She stayed out late laughing that night. But the next morning, she woke up alone. And I walked away, finally smiling. If you've ever walked away from someone who stopped seeing your worth, I hope this story gave you a little courage. Now tell us, what's a powerful moment from history where someone finally stood up and said, enough? Drop your answers in the comments. We'd love to hear them. And as always, thanks for watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth isn't always pretty, but it's always real.